A billionaire storms into his mansion, only to find his newborn baby tied up, helpless, and the maid standing right there. In that single moment, everything changes, and what happens next will shock you to your core. The storm was raging outside, but inside the marble mansion of billionaire Richard Cross, silence ruled like a king. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like a warning. Richard had built his empire on control. Control over numbers, people, and even his own emotions. But little did he know, within the four walls of his own house, something was happening that would shatter the illusion of control forever. That night, as the rain tapped against the tall glass windows, Richard's baby daughter, only a few months old, cried faintly from the nursery upstairs. Normally, he wouldn't have noticed. His staff took care of every detail in his life, from his meals to his child's every need. But tonight, something pulled him to listen more closely. The cry wasn't the usual soft whimper of hunger. It sounded muffled, restrained, almost suffocated. Richard's heart froze. Without thinking, he put down his glass of wine and hurried up the wide staircase, his footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness of the house. As he neared the nursery, the sound grew clearer but stranger. It was as if someone was trying to silence the baby. He pushed open the door, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Standing by the crib was Mariah, the maid he had hired only a month ago. A woman in her late 20s, dark-skinned, quiet. Someone who never spoke unless spoken to. She was supposed to be invisible, blending into the background like the furniture. But tonight, she was very much visible, and in her hands was a piece of cloth tied cruelly around the baby's tiny arms and chest. The baby struggled, eyes wide with panic, her cries broken and desperate. Richard couldn't breathe. "What the hell are you doing?" he roared, his voice shattering the silence like thunder. Mariah jumped, her hands trembling, but she didn't drop the cloth. Instead, she whispered something under her breath, something Richard couldn't understand. It wasn't English. It sounded like a chant, a prayer, or maybe a curse. His instincts screamed at him to grab his daughter, but shock rooted him to the ground for a split second too long. Finally, he lunged forward, shoving Mariah aside with a force he didn't know he had. She stumbled, hitting the edge of the crib, but she didn't scream or fight back. She just looked at him with eyes that seemed hollow, almost lifeless. Richard ripped the cloth away, lifting his baby into his arms. The child gasped, then wailed loudly, the sound echoing like salvation through the room. Relief washed over him, but it was fleeting, because when he turned back to Mariah, she was standing perfectly still, her hands folded in front of her, her face calm, as if nothing had happened. "You don't understand," she whispered finally, her voice low but steady. "I wasn't hurting her. I was saving her." Richard's rage flared. "Saving her? By tying her up? You're insane. You're finished here, Mariah. You'll never step foot in this house again." His voice cracked with both fury and fear. But something about her calmness unsettled him. She didn't beg, didn't cry, didn't explain further. She just looked at the baby, then at him, and said, "The danger is not me, Mr. Cross. It's already inside this house." Her words sent a chill down his spine. He wanted to dismiss them, to believe she was just mad, but the conviction in her tone made his stomach twist. Before he could demand answers, the butler and 2 security guards rushed into the room, alerted by the shouting. Richard, holding his baby tightly, barked an order. "Take her away. Now!" The guards grabbed Mariah by the arms, but even as they dragged her out, she didn't resist. She walked with them quietly, her head bowed, her lips still moving as if in silent prayer. The baby clung to Richard's shirt, her cries slowly softening, but his mind was in turmoil. Who was Mariah, really? And what did she mean by danger being inside the house? He had hired her through an agency, barely looking into her background. She had seemed ordinary, too ordinary. But now, Everything felt wrong. Later that night, after the police had taken Mariah away for questioning, Richard sat alone in his study, the fire flickering weakly in the fireplace. The baby slept in a crib beside him, safe now, or so he told himself. Yet he couldn't shake Mariah's words. Her eyes had burned with something he couldn't explain. Not madness, not fear, something deeper. And then, as the wind howled outside and the clock ticked past midnight, Richard heard it. A sound that froze his blood more than the storm or Mariah's whisper. From somewhere deep in the mansion, beyond the locked rooms and the silent corridors, came the soft cry of a baby. But his daughter was right beside him, asleep. Richard shot up from his chair, heart hammering. The cry echoed again, faint but clear. His daughter stirred but didn't wake. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the dark hallway, every instinct screaming that he shouldn't. Yet he couldn't stop himself. He had to know, had to see. Each step took him deeper into the mansion's shadows, toward a truth that would be more terrifying than anything he had ever faced. The mansion felt different at night. In the daylight, its vast corridors and gleaming marble floors symbolized wealth and power. But now, under the dim glow of wall lamps, it felt like a labyrinth of secrets. Richard's footsteps echoed softly as he followed the faint, eerie sound of crying that didn't belong to the baby sleeping peacefully in the study. The noise seemed to come from the west wing, a part of the mansion rarely used, filled with guest rooms and locked storage. Each step closer sent a prickling sensation up his neck, like unseen eyes were watching. When he reached the old oak door at the end of the corridor, the crying stopped. Silence pressed against his ears, heavy and suffocating. He hesitated, his hand trembling on the cold brass doorknob. Logic told him this was impossible. There was only one baby in the house, his daughter. But curiosity and dread pushed him to twist the handle and open the door. Inside, the room was dark and dusty, filled with covered furniture and boxes stacked high. A faint smell of mildew lingered in the air. He swept his flashlight across the space, and for a moment, nothing seemed unusual. Then the beam caught something. A cradle that had not been there before. Its wood was old, chipped, and painted in faded colors that belonged to another era. And inside it lay nothing but shadows. Richard's chest tightened. He stepped closer, every muscle tense, and then it happened. The cradle rocked slowly back and forth, though no one touched it. The sound of crying returned, louder now, coming directly from the cradle. His throat went dry. He yanked back the blanket inside, but the cradle was empty. Empty, yet the crying continued, echoing in his ears, bouncing off the walls until he couldn't tell where it came from anymore. His knees threatened to give way, but then, like a knife slicing through the madness, he heard a voice. Low, steady, and unmistakable. It was Mariah. "I told you," she whispered from the darkness. Richard spun around, the flashlight beam jerking wildly. At the far corner of the room stood Mariah, her wrists still bruised from where the guards had gripped her, her face calm as before. But she wasn't supposed to be here. The police had taken her hours ago. How? How are you here? Richard demanded, his voice cracking. His instincts screamed danger, but another part of him, deep and unwilling, needed answers. "You sent me away," she said softly, stepping into the light. "But the house won't let me go. It brought me back because you need to hear the truth." Her eyes flickered to the cradle, still rocking. "That sound you hear, it's not your baby. It's something much older, something bound to this place long before you ever set foot here." Richard shook his head violently, backing away. "No, this is insane. You're insane. My daughter, she was safe in my study. This house is just a house, nothing more." Mariah's expression hardened, though her voice remained gentle. "Do you really believe that, Mr. Cross? Have you ever wondered why this mansion was sold to you for less than half its value? Why the staff you hired never stay long. Why your daughter cries most nights as if she sees something you cannot. Her words stung because deep down, he knew she wasn't lying. Richard had brushed aside the whispers, the rumors about the mansion being cursed, because he didn't believe in nonsense. But now, standing in front of a rocking cradle with phantom cries echoing, denial felt impossible. "Why tie my baby?" he finally demanded, anger and fear clashing in his chest. "If you're trying to help, why hurt her?" Mariah's lips trembled. "I wasn't hurting her. I was binding her, protecting her from what tries to claim her. The cloth was part of a ritual passed down through my family. You wouldn't understand, but it was the only way to shield her." She took a step closer, and Richard didn't move this time. Her eyes glistened with urgency. "This house wants her, Mr. Cross, just as it wanted the children before her." Richard's breath caught. "Children before her? What are you talking about?" Mariah glanced at the cradle again, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "This mansion has a history. Long before it became your empire's crown jewel, it belonged to a family with a legacy soaked in sorrow. Every child born within these walls disappeared. No body was ever found. Only the crying remained. The spirits here are restless, hungry, and they have chosen your daughter." Richard staggered back, shaking his head. No, this is madness. My child is mine. No curse, no spirit, no house can take her." Mariah's face softened. "That is why you need me. You don't have to believe in what I say. But if you want her safe, you must trust me. Just for one night. Let me finish the ritual, and then decide whether I'm mad or not." Before Richard could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. The door slammed shut behind him, though no one was there. The air turned icy, his breath visible in the beam of the flashlight. And then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of footsteps, small, quick, like a child's, running across the floorboards above them. Richard's stomach twisted. His baby was supposed to be in the study downstairs, asleep. He bolted for the door, wrenching it open with force. The corridor stretched into darkness, the storm outside rattling the windows. He could hear the phantom footsteps leading toward the nursery. Without thinking, he sprinted, his heart pounding, Mariah's voice calling after him. "Don't go alone, Mr. Cross. You don't know what you're chasing." But he didn't stop. His only thought was of his daughter. He reached the nursery door, breathless, and pushed it open with a trembling hand. The crib was there, the mobile above it turning slowly. His daughter was inside, but she wasn't alone. Standing over her was a shadow, tall and twisted, its form flickering as though made of smoke. Its long fingers reached for the baby, who lay frozen, eyes wide with terror, but no sound coming from her lips. Richard's scream tore through the mansion. "Get away from her!" Richard didn't think. He just acted. He lunged toward the crib, his arms outstretched, but the shadow moved with a speed that defied reason. It dissolved into smoke, slipping through his grasp like mist, only to reform on the other side of the room. The baby's eyes followed it, wide and glassy, as if she could see something he couldn't. Richard scooped her up, clutching her tightly to his chest. His pulse pounded in his ears, drowning out every sound except the faint whimper of his daughter. Behind him, the nursery door creaked open. Mariah stood there, her face pale, her eyes burning with urgency. "Don't look at it," she cried. "Don't give it strength." But Richard's gaze was already locked on the creature. Its form flickered, a twisting mass of black smoke and glowing eyes, shifting between shapes, sometimes human, sometimes monstrous. It whispered in a voice that wasn't one voice but many, layered and overlapping. "She is ours. The house has claimed her." Richard's chest tightened, but rage rose inside him like fire. "Over my dead body," he growled. Mariah stepped into the room, her hands raised. murmuring in that same strange language Richard had heard earlier. Her voice grew louder, steadier, almost commanding. The shadow recoiled, hissing, the walls shuddering as though the house itself was resisting. Richard had never believed in the supernatural, but now, holding his child while a being of darkness hissed at them, disbelief was no longer an option. The lights flickered violently. The mobile above the crib spun so fast it snapped, pieces flying across the room. The baby wailed, pressing her face into Richard's chest. He wanted to run, to get out of the house entirely, but Mariah's voice anchored him. "Stay still," she shouted. "If you leave now, it will follow you forever. We must bind it here." Richard's instincts screamed to protect his daughter by fleeing, but something about Mariah's authority made him freeze. He watched as she drew a circle on the floor with chalk she seemed to pull from nowhere, her words rising like a storm. The shadow thrashed, its limbs stretching unnaturally, clawing at the walls, the ceiling, the crib. It struck out at Mariah, and for a moment Richard thought she would fall. But she stood firm, her eyes closed, her chanting louder. Then suddenly, silence. The shadow froze mid-lunge, its glowing eyes flickering like dying embers. And then it vanished. Richard collapsed against the crib, his baby still crying in his arms. Sweat dripped from his forehead, his heart racing. He looked up at Mariah, who was trembling but still standing, her breath ragged. What was that thing?" he demanded, his voice breaking. Mariah's eyes softened, though sorrow lingered in them. "It was the spirit of this house, bound here long before you, fed by fear, by children's cries, by despair. It has taken many before, and tonight it wanted your daughter." Richard shook his head, clutching the baby tighter. "No, that's impossible. Spirits, curses, rituals, that's nonsense. That thing wasn't real. It couldn't be." But his words rang hollow. The memory of the shadow's whisper, the cradle rocking on its own, the phantom cries, they were too real to dismiss. Mariah knelt down beside him, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "You don't have to believe, Mr. Cross, but you saw it with your own eyes. And if you want your daughter safe, you must accept what I'm telling you. This house is cursed. It will not stop until it takes what it wants." Richard looked down at his daughter. Her tiny fingers clung to his shirt, her sobs softening. The thought of losing her, of anything taking her away, made his stomach twist with a fear deeper than he had ever known. He had fought competitors, banks, governments even, but this was something he couldn't buy off or outsmart. For the first time, he felt powerless. "What do I do?" he whispered. Mariah's face was grave. "There is only one way. We must complete the binding ritual. It requires sacrifice, something you love, something of great value to you. Without it, the spirit will return. And next time, it won't just stop at your daughter." Richard's jaw tightened. "Sacrifice? Are you telling me I have to give up my child?" His voice cracked with fury. Mariah shook her head quickly. "No, not her, but something else the spirit will accept. Blood, yes, but it can be yours, or it can be the mansion itself. You must choose." Richard staggered back, his mind spinning. "You expect me to believe that I can just give up my house and this curse will end? That's insane." Mariah's gaze didn't waver. "You saw it. You know it's not insane. The house is the anchor. Destroy it, and the spirit will weaken. Refuse, and it will take what you hold most dear. You have one night to decide." The storm outside raged louder, as if echoing her words. Richard felt trapped, torn between disbelief and desperation. His empire, his fortune, his pride, all of it was tied to this mansion. But his daughter's life? That was worth more than everything. And yet, could he really let go of everything he had built? Before he could answer, the lights flickered again. A chilling laugh echoed through the walls, not from Mariah, Not from him, but from the house itself. The shadow was not gone. It was only waiting. Richard's grip on his daughter tightened, his heart torn in two. The laughter faded into the walls, leaving only silence. But Richard knew now it was the silence of a predator waiting for its prey. He stood in the center of the nursery, his baby clutched against his chest, Mariah kneeling beside him, the air thick with fear. The storm outside rattled the windows like a drum, as if urging him to make a decision. For the first time in his life, Richard Cross, the billionaire who had built an empire from nothing, felt cornered. Every problem in his life up to this moment had been solved with money, power, or influence. But here, none of those weapons mattered. He stared at Mariah, his voice trembling. If I do this, if I destroy this mansion, how do I know it will work? Mariah's eyes were steady, though exhaustion showed on her face. You don't. Faith is all you have. The spirit's power is tied to this place. Burn it, break it, abandon it. It doesn't matter how. As long as you sever the bond, your daughter will be free. Richard looked around at the nursery, the walls painted in soft pastels, the shelves lined with toys, the expensive chandelier hanging above. He had spared no expense in making this a palace for his child. And now he was being told this palace was a prison designed for something far darker. His mind reeled with resistance. Do you know what this house means? It's the symbol of everything I've achieved. People see this mansion, and they know my name, my power. And you're telling me to burn it all. Mariah's voice softened. A symbol can be rebuilt. A child cannot. Her words hit him like a blade. He looked down at his daughter. Her little eyes, still wet with tears, blinked up at him, trusting him completely. She didn't know the weight of the moment, but he did, and it crushed him. Suddenly, the chandelier above them swayed violently, though there was no wind. One by one, the bulb shattered, plunging the nursery into near darkness. The only light came from the flickering hallway lamp behind them. A deep rumble echoed through the mansion, and then the voice returned, this time clearer, closer. She is mine. The shadow materialized again, filling the far corner of the room. Its form was bigger now, stronger, fed by Richard's hesitation. Its limbs stretched across the walls like spider legs, its glowing eyes burning holes through the dark. The baby whimpered, sensing the presence. Mariah leapt to her feet, chanting again, her voice rising with urgency. The shadow hissed, recoiling, but this time it didn't retreat. It pushed back, surging forward, its form wrapping around the crib, the toys, the walls themselves. The entire nursery seemed to pulse with darkness. Richard's instinct screamed. He couldn't waste another second. He had to choose. He had to act. Clutching his daughter tightly, he shouted over the chaos. Fine. If it's the house you want, you can have it. I'll burn it to the ground myself. The moment the words left his lips, the house seemed to shudder. The walls groaned, the floor trembled, dust falling from the ceiling like rain. The shadow froze, as if startled. Mariah's chanting grew louder, stronger, weaving around Richard's declaration like a net. It heard you, she cried. Now you must follow through. Destroy it, and it will weaken. Richard didn't think twice. He bolted from the nursery, his daughter in his arms, Mariah close behind. The mansion seemed to fight them. Doors slamming shut, hallways stretching unnaturally long, whispers echoing from the walls. At one point, Richard swore he saw faces in the wallpaper, pale and twisted, watching him with hollow eyes. But he didn't stop. He ran for the study, where he knew a box of matches and a decanter of brandy sat waiting. They burst into the room, breathless. Richard set his daughter down in a travel crib, his hands shaking as he grabbed the brandy. Pouring it across the rug, the curtains, the shelves lined with books. Mariah stood guard, chanting, her eyes scanning the room as if expecting the shadow to burst through the walls at any second. When everything reeked of alcohol, Richard struck a match. The flame danced in his hand, small but alive, a promise of destruction. His throat tightened. This wasn't just a house. It was his identity, his empire. But then his gaze fell on his daughter, her tiny hand reaching through the crib bars, her face calm now, as if she knew he was there to protect her. That was all it took. He dropped the match. The fire caught instantly, racing across the rug, licking up the curtains, devouring the shelves. Heat blasted against his face, smoke curling upward. The house groaned, the walls shaking as if in agony. The shadow screamed, a high-pitched wail that rattled the glass windows. Mariah shouted over the roar of flames. "We must go! Now!" Richard scooped up his daughter, his heart hammering, and together they raced through the burning halls. Fire spread like a beast unleashed, consuming everything in its path. Chandeliers crashed to the ground, paintings curled into ash. The marble floors cracked under the heat. Behind them, the shadow thrashed, twisting, shrinking, its form unraveling in the flames. They burst through the front doors just as the roof gave way. Rain poured down in torrents, mixing with the smoke, but the fire raged on, unstoppable. Richard staggered into the storm. His baby pressed against his chest, Mariah beside him, both of them watching as the mansion, the symbol of his empire, burned to the ground. The shadow let out one final scream, then vanished in the collapsing inferno. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of rain and Richard's own ragged breathing. The house was gone. His empire's crown jewel was reduced to flames and rubble. But in his arms, his daughter stirred, safe, alive. Richard sank to his knees in the wet grass, tears mingling with rain, his body trembling. He had lost everything, and yet he still had what mattered most. Mariah stood beside him, her face illuminated by the fire's glow. "It's done," she whispered. "She's safe now." But Richard knew this was not the end. The shadow was gone, yes, but its memory, its curse would linger. And he wondered, as he held his daughter tighter, if the spirit truly died in the flames, or if it was only waiting for another chance. The fire roared through the night, painting the sky with red and orange as if the heavens themselves were burning. Richard held his daughter close, her tiny heartbeat steady against his chest, as the mansion crumbled into ash. The rain poured harder, hissing against the flames, but nothing could put them out until the house was nothing more than a skeleton of smoking ruins. When it was finally over, silence fell. The storm eased, the wind quieted, and the once mighty mansion of Richard Cross lay in smoldering pieces. The shadow was gone. At least, Richard prayed it was. He sat in the wet grass, exhausted, the weight of what he had done pressing down on him. His empire's crown jewel, the very symbol of his success, was gone forever. But in his arms, his daughter slept peacefully, her face calm for the first time in weeks. Mariah stood beside him, soaked to the bone, her face illuminated by the dying glow of the fire. She was quiet, watching him, as if giving him space to grieve. Finally, Richard broke the silence, his voice low and cracked. "I destroyed everything I built. And yet, I feel like I've never had more." Mariah's eyes softened. "You chose what mattered, Mr. Cross. That's more than most men with power ever do." Her words sank deep into him. He had spent years climbing ladders, making ruthless decisions, crushing competitors, all to become untouchable. And yet tonight, all his money and power had been useless. What saved his daughter was not wealth, but sacrifice. He looked at Mariah, questions swirling in his mind. "Why did you come here? Why did you risk yourself for my child?" For the first time, her calm facade cracked. She looked away, her voice heavy with memory. "Because I've seen what happens when no one fights back. I was born in a place where the same curse lingered. My younger brother was taken by a spirit like this. My mother tried to save him, but she failed. Ever since that night, I swore I would never let another child be claimed if I could stop it. When I came to work here, I felt it immediately. The same presence, the same hunger. I knew it would come for her. Richard's throat tightened. He wanted to thank her, but words felt too small. All he could manage was, "You save her life. I'll never forget that." The authorities arrived by dawn, sirens cutting through the quiet. Firefighters, police, and news crews swarmed the estate, staring at the ruins in disbelief. Richard Cross, once untouchable billionaire, was now a man who had lost his fortune's centerpiece overnight. The reporters asked questions he refused to answer. The police wanted statements he couldn't give. What would he say? That a ghost tried to steal his daughter? That his maid fought off a curse older than the mansion itself? No one would believe him. So he gave them silence. Let them assume what they wanted. That it was an accident, a lightning strike, an electrical fault. The truth was something the world would never accept. Days turned into weeks. Richard and his daughter moved into a modest townhouse across the city, far smaller than the mansion, far humbler. For the first time in years, Richard cooked his own meals, carried his own bags, lived without an army of staff. And strangely, he found peace in it. Each night, he sat with his daughter, reading her to sleep, listening to her soft breathing. No phantom cries, no shadows in the corners. Just father and child. Mariah stayed, though not as a maid anymore. Richard insisted she live as part of the household, a protector, a friend, even family. She hesitated at first, but when she looked at the baby, who smiled at her now without fear, she agreed. Together, the three of them built a new kind of home, one not defined by wealth or size, but by safety and trust. Yet sometimes, when Richard was alone, he still thought of that night. The voice, the cradle, the burning walls. He wondered if the spirit truly died in the flames, or if it still lingered, waiting for another house, another family. He didn't know, but he knew one thing for certain. If it ever returned, he would be ready. One evening, months later, Richard stood by the window as the sun set, his daughter giggling in Mariah's arms. The sound of her laughter filled the small home, brighter than any chandelier, stronger than any empire. Richard smiled, a real smile, the kind he hadn't felt in years. He realized then that he hadn't lost everything. He had lost what didn't matter, and gained what did. And so, the story of the billionaire who burned his own mansion was whispered across the city, twisted by rumors and speculation. Some said it was madness. Others said it was insurance fraud. But Richard never cared what they said. Because the truth, the real truth, was something only he, Mariah, and his daughter would ever know. That night, as he tucked his baby into bed, she reached out, her tiny hand gripping his finger. For the first time, Richard felt peace. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You're safe now. Always." And somewhere, far away, in the ashes of the old mansion, the wind carried a faint whisper. Not of anger, not of hunger, just silence. For now. Friends, if this story shocked you, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with your friends. And yes, if you want to hear more powerful and unpredictable stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next twist.